The Battle of Yorktown was the moment that changed everything in the American Revolution. It was the final act of a long and brutal struggle that tested the patience, the will, and the courage of the colonies.
Here George Washington stood face to face with the might of the British Empire led by General Cornwallis.
The fate of independence hung on what happened here.
Outnumbered, outgunned, and almost broken, the Americans had one final chance.
For 6 years they had fought through cold hunger and despair. They had watched friends die of disease or desert because of empty promises of pay. Yet they endured. By the spring of 1781, Washington's army, camped outside New York City, looked tired and thin but still determined. Across the water, the British commander Sir Henry Clinton held New York in his grasp with fortifications bristling with cannon. Washington thought of striking the city, for such a victory would shake the empire itself. But he knew the odds. His men were few and supplies scarce. A direct assault could end in disaster. Then came news that changed everything. The French, who had become America's most crucial ally, hinted at sending a fleet across the Atlantic. Admiral de Grasse, with powerful ships, could tip the balance of power at sea. If French ships trapped a British army near the coast, Washington could move by land to finish the job. The question was where. Yorktown in Virginia soon became the answer. Cornwallis had begun consolidating his forces there along a peninsula between two rivers. If trapped by sea and land, Cornwallis would have no escape. In late August, Admiral de Grasse arrived off the Virginia coast with 29 warships, cutting Cornwallis off from reinforcements. When this news reached Washington, his eyes lit with hope that had long been absent. He decided to act. What followed was one of the boldest troop movements in American history. Washington, together with French commander Rochambeau, secretly led more than 12,000 men on a grueling 700-mile march from New York to Virginia. Roads were muddy, supplies thin, yet they pushed on, driven by the belief that freedom was within reach. Their destination was Yorktown, where the fate of the Revolution would be decided. Once in Virginia, Washington ordered Lafayette to confine Cornwallis on the peninsula, while he and Rochambeau prepared for siege. French engineers and American troops dug trenches by day and night, working under constant fire. They inched closer to British lines with every passing hour. By early October, the trenches were near enough to bring artillery within range. On October 9, Washington himself fired the first cannon shot, which legend says smashed into a table where British officers were dining. The siege had begun. 4 days and nights, Franco-American guns thundered without pause, tearing down British defenses. Bombs and cannonballs rained upon Yorktown, leaving fires and destruction everywhere. A German soldier fighting with the British later described the horror. He wrote of bombs as heavy as 200 pounds exploding in the air or crashing into the ground, severing limbs, killing soldiers and civilians alike. Houses collapsed, ships in the harbor were smashed, and terrified townspeople fled to the riverbanks.
Inside Yorktown, Cornwallis grew desperate.
His only hope was relief from General Clinton in New York. He sent frantic pleas for reinforcements, but Clinton hesitated. He enjoyed the comforts of the city and worried that leaving New York undefended would invite French attack. Eventually he did send a fleet, but by then the French Navy blocked the Chesapeake. At the Battle of the Capes, the British were turned back, sealing Cornwallis's fate. As October wore on, Washington knew the moment to strike had arrived. On the moonless night of October 14, he ordered his men forward in silence with bayonets fixed. No shots were to be fired until the fortifications were reached. The assault was brutal and personal. Soldiers hacked through wooden barriers, while others climbed over walls with the help of comrades. In the dark, the clash of steel echoed as bayonets met swords and men fought hand to hand. Washington watched with sorrow, yet also with resolve, for he knew freedom demanded sacrifice. 2 days later, Cornwallis tried to break out by ferrying troops across the York River. At first some boats succeeded, but a sudden storm scattered the rest. The plan collapsed, and with it Cornwallis's last hope. His men were exhausted, his defenses crumbling. On the morning of October 17, a drummer appeared on the British lines, followed by an officer carrying a white flag. The firing stopped. Negotiations began. Cornwallis himself claimed illness and refused to attend the surrender. Instead, he sent Brigadier General Charles O'Hara, who first tried to surrender, to the French commander Rochambeau. Rochambeau shook his head and pointed to Washington. Washington too declined and directed O'Hara to General Benjamin Lincoln, who had once been forced to surrender at Charleston. Lincoln accepted the sword, and the humiliation was complete. On October 19, 1781, the British Army marched out of Yorktown. They requested the honors of war to march with flags flying and music playing, but Washington denied them that right, for the British had once denied it to the Americans at Charleston. As the defeated soldiers passed between lines of American and French troops, they faced only the French until Lafayette gave the command for his band to strike up Yankee Doodle. Cheers of huzzah erupted from the Americans as the British finally turned their eyes to the rebels they once scorned, now recognized as equals. In London, the news reached Prime Minister Lord North weeks later. On hearing of Cornwallis's surrender, he cried out, "Oh God, it is all over." The war was indeed over. Within 2 years, the Treaty of Paris was signed, granting independence to the United States of America. Thus, October 19th, not July 4th, became the day the dream of independence truly became reality. The Battle of Yorktown showed that determination, courage, and the aid of allies could overcome even the greatest empire of the age. Washington's leadership and the sacrifices of countless unnamed soldiers secured freedom for a new nation. Today we remember the Declaration of Independence as the nation's birth, but it was at Yorktown where that promise was fulfilled. The ragged army of farmers and shopkeepers who had once seemed doomed to defeat had brought the mighty British Empire to its knees. The world had indeed turned upside down. And so the revolution ended not with speeches or signatures, but with cannon fire, trenches, and the clash of steel. It ended with men marching out of Yorktown, their heads heavy with defeat, and others standing tall knowing they had won not only a battle but the future of a nation.